Lake Erie skydiving disaster. Imagine jumping from a plane at 20,000 feet, expecting to see solid ground beneath you, only to find yourself plummeting towards an endless, unforgiving lake. That's exactly what happened to 18 experienced divers on August 27, 1967, in one of the deadliest skydiving disasters in history. The plan was simple: a thrilling jump from a North American B-25 Mitchell bomber over Ortner Airport in Ohio. But when thick cloud cover blocked the view, the pilot relied on Cleveland Air Traffic Control to guide him. Huge mistake. A mix-up with another aircraft's position meant that instead of being over land, the plane was actually over Lake Erie, miles from shore. The skydivers, trusting the guidance, leaped one by one, straight into a watery grave. At 4,000 feet, they broke through the clouds and realized the horror. There was no ground, just cold, merciless water. Panic set in. Heavy parachutes and gear pulled them under. Some tried desperately to shed their equipment, but only 2 managed to survive long enough for rescue. 16 drowned. The aftermath was brutal. Investigations found fault on all sides: the pilot, the skydivers, and air traffic control. Lawsuits followed, but the courts ruled that the skydivers weren't responsible for their own deaths. Instead, it was a tragic chain of errors that sealed their fate. A simple miscommunication, a blind leap, and 16 lives lost. This disaster remains a chilling reminder of how even the smallest errors in aviation can have deadly consequences. Ueli Gegenschatz. Red Bull lives by the mantra, bad publicity is better than no publicity. And for years, their extreme sports sponsorships have been the lifeblood of their brand. Daring, high risk, and exhilarating. But what happens when the thrill turns fatal? On November 11, 2009, Swiss base jumper Ueli Gegenschatz, one of Red Bull's star athletes, took a leap off Zurich's Oerlikon Tower. It was supposed to be another breathtaking moment for an adrenaline-fueled promo, but the wind had other plans. A sudden gust sent Gegenschatz spiraling into the building, and later, the concrete. Days later, he succumbed to his injuries. And here's the kicker. This wasn't the first Red Bull-linked base jumping death that year. Just months earlier, American jumper Eli Thompson met a similar fate mid-flight in a wingsuit promotion. Suddenly, the high-octane energy drink was facing some serious heat, not for what was in their cans, but for what their athletes were risking. In 2010, Red Bull was a global behemoth, pushing 3.5 billion cans per year and making a fortune on the back of extreme sports. $3.56 billion in revenue, with nearly $970 million sunk into marketing alone. Their formula: make the audience hold their breath, glue their eyes to the screen, and, most importantly, remember the name. But when the thrill comes with real-world consequences, where's the line? Some call it reckless. Others argue that extreme athletes understand the risks. Calculated risks, but risks nonetheless. One wrong wind gust, one miscalculation, and the dream shatters in an instant. So the real question isn't whether Red Bull will keep sponsoring these high-stakes spectacles. The real question is, how many tragedies does it take before the cost outweighs the hype? Melissa Porter. Alright, let's dive into this story, shall we? It's a real heartbreaker, but also a stark reminder of the risks involved in extreme sports. So here's the gist. Melissa Porter, a 29-year-old Australian skydiving champion, tragically died while performing an advanced maneuver called swooping at a skydiving facility in Texas. Now, this swooping thing, it's basically where you dive your parachute really fast towards the ground and then try to level out for a smooth landing. Sounds intense, right? The thing is, Melissa, who was an experienced instructor, attempted this move a little too close to the ground. Witnesses say she had a hard landing and then tumbled into a shallow body of water. What's chilling is that her body showed no signs of blunt force trauma. They're still trying to figure out if it was a medical emergency or the impact itself that caused her death. Now, here's where it gets really poignant. Melissa was clearly passionate about skydiving. Her mom said she died doing what she loved, and that it was her happy place. She even wanted to inspire other women to get into the sport, which had traditionally been male-dominated. The skydiving community is absolutely devastated. Tributes are pouring in, describing her as an inspiration and a beautiful person. They're even planning a memorial skydive in her honor. It's a tragic loss, no doubt, but it also highlights the inherent dangers of pushing the limits. Even the most experienced athletes can make fatal mistakes. And it leaves you wondering, doesn't it? How do we balance our passions with the risks they entail? It's a question without easy answers, but one that's worth pondering. Stephen Hilder. Imagine jumping out of a plane at 13,000 feet, feeling the rush of the wind, the adrenaline, the thrill, only to realize your parachutes have been sabotaged. This is the terrifying fate that befell 20-year-old Stephen Hilder in 2003 at Hillbaldstow Airfield, England. A skilled skydiver with over 200 jumps, Hilder was in the middle of a team skydive when his main and reserve parachutes failed, sending him plummeting to his death. What made this case truly chilling? The police quickly discovered that Hilder's parachute wasn't just faulty, it had been expertly tampered with. The risers connecting his reverse chute were cleanly cut, leading to one of the most baffling investigations in British crime history. Was it murder? A twisted act of revenge? Or, as the police later suggested, a bizarre and unexplainable suicide? The case took wild turns. His teammates were arrested and later released. DNA tests on the parachute straps only found Hilder's own DNA, leading investigators to suggest he had sabotaged his own equipment. But why? He had debts, a failed relationship, and believed wrongly that he was flunking his military academy exams. Yet, no one close to him believed he would take his own life. The coroner refused to call it suicide, and the case remains an open mystery. Was there a hidden saboteur, perhaps wearing gloves? Or did Hilder somehow orchestrate his own death in a way that still baffles experts today? What do you think? Murder, suicide, or something even stranger? Brigadier Tariq Mahmoud. Imagine the scene. A sky full of paratroopers, the rush of wind, the thrill of free fall. But for Brigadier Tariq Mahmoud, also known as Brigadier TM, this moment of elite skill and discipline turned into a tragic nightmare. On May 29, 1989, during a demonstration jump at the Pakistan Army Aviation School in Gujranwala, something went terribly wrong. Brigadier TM, a legendary officer of the Special Service Group, led his team with precision, but as he leaped from the Army's Mi-17 helicopter, his main parachute failed to deploy. Chaos followed. The cords became entangled, refusing to unfurl. He fought against time, grabbing his dagger to cut himself free. But in the frantic struggle, disaster struck. He accidentally released both his main and reserve parachutes. With nothing to slow him down, he plummeted to the earth at a terrifying speed. Witnesses could only watch in horror as he crashed with such force that his body weight, due to the velocity, was estimated to be a staggering 200 tons upon impact. His death sent shockwaves through the military and the country. Brigadier TM wasn't just an officer, he was a symbol of elite training, bravery, and leadership. The tragedy became a stark reminder of the unforgiving nature of parachuting, even for the best of the best. To this day, his legacy lives on, immortalized in the ranks of the SSG, where his name is spoken with deep respect. His death was a devastating loss, but his spirit remains an inspiration to Pakistan's elite forces, reminding them of the risk they embrace in the name of duty. Jürgen Mühlmann. Jürgen W. Mühlmann's death was as dramatic as his life. Once a rising star in Germany's Free Democratic Party, he was a man known for his bold political stunts. He even parachuted into campaign events. But on June 5, 2003, his final jump ended in tragedy. Witnesses claim he intentionally cut himself loose from his parachute, plummeting to his death. Investigators suspect suicide, which came on the same day police raided his home in a fraud and tax evasion investigation. Mühlmann wasn't just any politician. He was controversial, flamboyant, and in many ways, self-destructive. His outspoken views on Israel and Jewish community leaders sparked outrage, and his involvement in illegal party financing scandals cost him his career. Once a close ally to Chancellor Helmut Kohl, he was later blamed for the FDP's disastrous election results. By 2003, his political life had crumbled. He resigned from the party, but not from parliament. The timing of his death was eerie. Hours before his fatal jump, authorities stripped him of immunity, opening the door for legal action. As investigators searched his home, he boarded a plane for one last skydive, one he seemingly never intended to survive. A tragic fall from grace? A defiant last act? Either way, Mühlmann's death cemented his reputation as a man who lived and died on his own terms. Roger Nelson. Roger Nelson wasn't just any skydiver. He was a legend in the sport, a world champion, a national gold medalist, a pioneering instructor, and the owner of Skydive Chicago, one of the most active drop zones in the world. With 9,000 jumps and over 11,000 flight hours under his belt, Nelson was a master of the sky. But on June 7, 2003, the sky turned against him. In a tragic low-altitude collision, Nelson's canopy tangled with another jumper's at just 50 feet above the ground. The impact sent him plummeting. Despite being rushed to the hospital, he didn't make it. The other jumper, Todd Fay, suffered serious injuries but survived. For the skydiving world, a community accustomed to risk, this was a shock that hit hard. Nelson wasn't just a participant in the sport, he shaped it. He wrote extensively on freefall techniques, helped set world records, and taught countless skydivers how to navigate the air with precision. His passion wasn't just about jumping, it was about safety, skill, and pushing the limits. This wasn't a reckless stunt gone wrong. It was a freak accident that took down a man who had dedicated his life to understanding and mastering the skies. The skydiving world mourned a pioneer, a teacher, and a fearless flyer who lived for the thrill of freefall. His legacy? A sport made safer, a generation of skydivers inspired, and a name that will always be synonymous with pushing the limits of human flight. Adrian Nicholas. Adrian Nicholas was no ordinary thrill seeker. He was a man who literally chased the sky, setting world records and bringing a 500-year-old Da Vinci design to life. But on September 17, 2005, his final jump at Paris Centrum Textile, Netherlands ended in tragedy. At just 750 feet, a critical piece of safety equipment failed, causing his reserve parachute to deploy uncontrollably. He was blown off course, crashing to the ground. Despite immediate medical attention, Adrian didn't survive. Nicholas wasn't just a daredevil, he was a pioneer. He held the world record for the longest freefall delay at 4 minutes and 55 seconds, and made history by gliding 10 miles unassisted through the sky. His most famous stunt? Jumping from a hot air balloon using a parachute designed by Leonardo da Vinci in 1485. Made of wooden poles, canvas, and rope, it had never been tested, until Adrian decided he would be the one to prove the Renaissance genius right. And he did. "It took one of the greatest minds to design it," he once said, "but it took 500 years to find someone crazy enough to try it." A former Capital FM presenter, Adrian traded a radio career for the adrenaline-fueled world of skydiving. His passion was shared with his longtime partner Katarina Olekainen, who built his medieval parachute. Together, they had a 1-year-old daughter, Ella. Described by his friends as a true free spirit, Adrian wasn't just about breaking records, he was about pushing boundaries. His legacy in skydiving remains unparalleled, a reminder that some people aren't meant to stay on the ground. Seth Stone. Some people are wired differently. They don't just live life, they chase it, headfirst into the fire. Commander Seth Stone was one of those people. A Navy SEAL, twice awarded the Silver Star, a warrior, a leader, and by all accounts, the kind of man others would follow into hell and back. But life, as it often does, had other plans. On September 30th, 2017, Stone took a leap from a hot air balloon in California, but this time, his parachute didn't open. Just like that, a man who had survived some of the most intense combat zones on Earth lost his life in a skydiving accident. But to understand why that's so tragic, you need to know who he was. Stone wasn't just another SEAL. He led Delta Platoon in SEAL Team 3, the same unit that included Michael Mansour, the hero who threw himself on a grenade to save his brothers in Iraq. Stone was right there, in the chaos of Ramadi, leading his men through gunfire, RPG attacks, and impossible odds. When Mansour fell, Stone didn't break. He pushed forward, directing his team under heavy enemy fire to save the wounded. And he didn't stop there. Across multiple deployments, Stone earned a second Silver Star, a Bronze Star with Valor, and a reputation as a man who didn't flinch in the face of danger. But for all the war stories, he was also just Seth, a guy who loved surfing, adventure, and his SEAL brothers. And now, the community that revered him is left with a void. He lived on the edge, and in the end, the edge took him.